Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being back here for part two. I know many of you already said that you were here for session one. Today, we're going to be talking about AI for nonprofits. This is part two. We're going to do some hands-on demonstrations with Microsoft Copilot and talk about some use cases as well. My name is Aretha Simons. I'm the webinar producer here at TechSoup. I'm going to show you how you can engage today on the next slide. We have some team members from Roundtable Technology, Kim Snyder, Destiny Powers, and Corrine Wheeler. But this is being recorded, and you will get the slides and the video replay maybe by tomorrow. If you have a question, we would love if you would put a Q or the word question in front of your question, because it's going to be quite a few people here today, and so we want to be able to capture your questions. Everybody's on mute. If you want to ask your questions live, go ahead and use that raise your hand option. And for the sake of recording, if you would display your correct government name, that would be so helpful. After the live recording, you're going to get some emails sent to you. And if you have any questions, in the meantime, there is our team member, Kevin Mulhall's email. We'll be putting that in the chat throughout the presentation today. You can reach out to him and he'll answer questions on behalf of TechSoup. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Kim. You guys have a great webinar and everybody enjoy.
Thank you so much, Aretha. It is wonderful to be here. So you have had somewhat introductions, but we'll go ahead and just quickly. I'm Kim, 3DPO, don't even ask, though Corinne can tell you about it. And then passing the hat to Destiny.
I am Destiny of the dual titles as well, and happy to frogify today.
Hi, I'm Corinne, and mine's pretty easy, marketing coordinator. I was going to say, Destiny's is actually harder than yours, Kim. So,
well, yes, it's harder to pronounce. All righty, so heading forward. So today's contents, we're going to give you a recap of session one. So we're going to start off with a brief recap. So folks, we saw that some people could not be here for session one. So we're going to cover some of the highlights, and it is also available as a recording. And we're going to spend some time talking about prompt writing today. And also, how are nonprofits using Copilot? And best practices for implementing. So Destiny is going to be talking about some of the ways that you can roll out Copilot in your organization responsibly. Then we're going to spend a chunk of time on a live demonstration hands-on. During that time, there will be plenty of time for Q&A. So please feel free to drop questions in or save them. And you can raise your hand later in the live demo part and ask your questions, or you can ask us to do something for you. All right, and the ever-present jargon buster, because we are talking about tech, because this is AI, there is, sometimes it's an occupational hazard, we lapse into acronymism or, tech talk. If that happens, and we try hard not to do that, if that happens, just put hashtag jargon and we will slow down and examine our use of language and explain things more clearly. All right, so the recap of session one. Some people who weren't here for session one, Destiny, might even already be wondering, like, frogs, what are they talking about? I thought I came to AI, not amphibian class. Amphibian intelligence.
One in the same. One in the same.
Okay, so it'll all make sense in a second. Sort of. We do talk about exponential growth. We actually don't go through all of that because that was part of session one, but we talk about, we use a lily pad metaphor that was in session one, and that's hence the frogs. But let's just say exponential growth is when things double every day, or when things double as they proceed forward. Linear growth, which is, what's a good color to use here? Purple. So linear growth is this kind of line here that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it goes in order. Exponential growth is a little bit trickier, right? 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. So things double every day. And yes, bunnies could have worked here too, Destiny, actually, now that you're mentioning it. But it gets to a certain point where all of a sudden things doubling every day means they get the increase is much higher, and every day even more so. right? And so this idea that we are at a point in the exponential growth curve of AI where it is kind of growing at leaps and bounds. And I do have to say that even in this past week of using AI, where my own mind continues to be blown constantly, we are surely there, where the rate of growth is just through the roof, right? So, all right. So how did all of this start moving so fast anyway? And it's funny, this chart doesn't make it look so linear, though some things are. Reading comprehension kind of happened along a path. But handwriting analysis was one of the first forms that the AI that we are kind of talking about for the most part today, generative AI, or AI that makes things. So this kind of AI has its roots in handwriting analysis. So back in the it's like 1800s, no, in the late 1980s, and early 1990s, the post office first started using image recognition for handwriting and recognition of zip codes, right? So they're processing many pieces of mail and trying to sort them by zip code, right? So this is where it got its start. And then this capability improved over time. You see, things started to kind of shift here, and then later after 2015. In 2007, some big things happened around image recognition and the ability to get computers or computer systems to recognize images, right? And at that point, you really start to see this led to more of this growth that then we'll see with like reading comprehension, this more kind of speech recognition, predictive reasoning, like all of these things, then the growth curve isn't a curve at all. It's a straight line, right? So, and now we're seeing more systems today with reasoning abilities, right? And in this, and I initially would kind of wince at this, like the zero line being the human performance line. So that's not to say that like all these machines are so much smarter than all of us or so much, better. But the thing is, there's certain, human performance as benchmarks. In other words, in kind of a tested situation, these systems can move often a lot faster than human beings can. I know that Copilot, for example, can read through long PDFs much more quickly than I can and sift out the key points. All right. So it beats the Kim benchmark at PDF consumption. I will give it that. Right. So that's what this type of thing. But you can see a lot of these capabilities are kind of going in the above the human performance benchmark level. Oh dear. Is that a corn Ferris wheel? Anyway, I won't distract myself. So some of the things that account for this are, in addition to these technologies building upon each other, you're also seeing as we move down this trajectory of time, much faster processing capabilities of computer systems and much more data. So they're consuming a lot more data. So that combination is another thing that accounts for this level of growth. And this is partly to give folks context for how and why things are changing so much all the time. Because like with Copilot, for example, in the last session that we taught, like there are certain ways that the AI has improved, like for some of these demos. And I'll show you that later on. One of the things I was experimenting with last night was in the slide creation. I was like, wow, this is like kind of easier to do than it was last time. And wow, it goes straight to slides now. That's pretty cool, right? So here's another way to look at these kinds of improvements, right? In March 2022, not forever ago, recent, a while ago, but kind of still recent. If I put the word frog into a text to image system, I got this guy, right? I probably wouldn't necessarily tell you that was a frog. I don't know. Corinne, what do you think? Frog? Nah. Green blob, right? But then April gets a little better. He's got 3 eyes, but kind of getting a frog mouth. July, frogish, ish. November, whoa, that's a frog. Like, no doubt about it. May, June, so it keeps getting better. And then this is the actual frog, which kind of looks like fake and meek in comparison to the March 2024 frog, just a mere 2 years later. And now in February, we're making them hop and still look realistic. So that's another way to look at the improvements and growth in these technologies. So the generative AI systems, in a nutshell, this is like a gross oversimplification, but we have a number of free systems that you can just try out on the web, right? So ChatGPT has a free version, Claude free version, Google's Gemini is free, Microsoft Copilot web chat is free. I want to just say that today's session, sponsored by Microsoft through TechSoup, we're going to be focusing on Copilot. Just because we can teach a lot of the stuff that's important to using these tools through Copilot. And so just to have that up front, just so that everyone knows. So we're going to be spending some chunk of time around this tool. And also, so what are all the differences here? You have Copilot here 3 times. Why do we do that, right? So Microsoft Copilot web chat, Corinne's going to show us that later on. You don't even have to, like, if you've never like used AI or any of these tools, and even if you don't have Microsoft and you're like, I don't know if I want to do this, you can try it for free, no risk, no credit card, no nothing, right? You can just give it a try, see how it works. Then there's Microsoft Copilot Chat. For any of you that have Microsoft subscriptions through your organizations, this is free with your subscription. There are also a lot of really good reasons why we encourage organizations to especially when getting started with AI, generative AI, they use this tool right here. And we're going to get into that in a number of different ways as we talk about rollout. And then there's a paid version that's the one that this plugs into the like Excel and PowerPoint. It plugs into the Microsoft software applications and kind of works within and alongside them. Okay, that's Microsoft Copilot Pro. So there are 3 Copilots, and indeed there are 3 Copilots that we'll be talking about. So and they're also paid versions of these other systems, ChatGPT Team and Google and Claude Teams. And so these systems also have paid, there's a reason to go with paid subscription. You know, that term, if you're not paying anything, you're the product. True here too. So some fundamental components of generative artificial intelligence systems. Okay, so the person, this is Destiny in this case. Please help me make an image of a frog playing poker. So she puts this into the system. This then gets processed. It's natural language processing. Look, I couldn't draw that circle. Natural language processing, meaning it understood. She wanted, well, a group of frogs playing poker, actually. And then it pulls from this massive amount of data, which in no way proportionally in this drawing resembles like, this would be like 5 football bigger, right? So it pulls from the data to then create that frog. And then it spits it back out at Destiny, and she can say, that's a beautiful frog, right? Yay. Or, I want really more serious looking frogs, right? That request, or if you tell the AI, no, that's not quite what I was looking for, or yes, this is really great. This is what's known as reinforcement learning through human feedback, right? So the system itself, which can process language, can know whether this output that it gave you was corresponding to the input that you gave it. And so that information in turn gets fed back into the system. Okay, so this is, and we're talking about, actually we're gonna I think I click. Okay, so all right, so here's an important concept. I'm talking about free versus paid subscriptions. So right now, if Destiny were, she's not, but if she were on the completely free version of any tool, like the ChatGPT for free or even the Copilot, but with no license, no subscription, her input or whatever you put in as your prompt then becomes training data for the system, right? It becomes part of that large kind of data repository that it continues to learn from. If, however, she's using a subscription-based service, so say she's logged into Copilot through her work account, which I believe she is, then that does not happen, right? That is not used for training data. So that is one of the main reasons, and it's a big, huge reason, because one of the risks of AI, you hear a lot of people talk about, my concerns about AI around privacy. And true, you want to be mindful of what data you put in these prompts, like your whole donor list and their personal information. Maybe not, right? But the data that goes in, if you're on your work subscription, then does not become part of the training data. And that's an important concept. So yes, and Mark, I realize I am going through last week's session, but we were just about to get through it, actually, very soon. 2 slides. So what are some of the key risks that people should be aware of? So the privacy risk, right? Hallucination and confabulation. Okay, so the AI can make things up. It's generative. It's creating things. So it's important to remember that so it can make something up, it can make up content, and often it's the right content. Sometimes it's not quite right. Sometimes it's completely wrong, but it always sounds confident. So always review what the AI provides you. Okay, as far as bias, yes, there is bias in the world's data. These systems are trained on the world's data. So again, that's another reason to always review what the systems create. Copyright, and you've seen a lot of this probably in the news around some AI has been trained on information and people's writing and images that are copywritten. So I generally never will ask for something in an author's specific style or an artist's to avoid any copyright infringement. I don't want to, literally take someone's style because it might have been used as training data. And there are existential risks with AI, as there are with many things. So it can be, yes, misused by bad actors. And yes, there are environmental costs to it, right? And so you are mindful as you use these systems, right? And I think that's one of the reasons it's really good that so many nonprofits are in these sessions today, so that you can ask these questions, raise these questions, and use these systems knowing that there's 2 sides, right? So I think at this point, and thank you for the people who were here in session 1, but I just wanted to repeat that for the many who were not. So we're going to talk now about prompt writing. So this week starts to get into a little bit more of the how-to part of thing. Okay, so one kind of semantic thing I have here. It's all you often hear about it referred to as prompt engineering, right? And where did that title come from? Engineers and IT folks, right? It's really, think of it more as writing. Think of it as having a conversation with AI. You do not have to do any engineering tasks. So it's a matter of talking to it. So people will ask me, what's the best way to learn prompt engineering? I'm like, well, first of all, it's having a conversation with the AI and trying out saying different things to it and asking in different ways. It's like if you had a new intern come in to your nonprofit and you knew that this person or, AI, whatever, knew a lot of stuff, how would you ask for what you need in order to get what you want? And you have to be clear, right? It's also okay to ask the AI, is this information helpful? What information would be most helpful for you in giving you, for you to give me what I've asked for? And in general, although one of the AI kind of superstars out there. Sam Altman said, like, why are people saying thank you so much? It's really costing us too much money. I think it doesn't hurt to be polite. I often do thank it, so I realize I'm probably costing money for somebody, but I don't want to lose my manners and say, do this, do that. It just doesn't feel right, right? But think about it as a conversation, right? So the quality of your input and how you shape that will have a real direct bearing on on the output that you get. And one of the things, so we're going to cover like a prompting structure that we actually, there's an ebook and we'll share the link with you, that kind of gives you a certain kind of process for creating a prompt. And then you can then work within that process to get what you want. And think of it as really having a conversation. I can't stress that enough, right? So the prompt writing, and let me grab the ebook link. Whoops, come on. Let me grab this. So this is an ebook from Microsoft and TechSoup, prompt writing with impact. So the impact method of writing a prompt. So these are the things you tell the AI. And again, think of telling an intern or describing to an intern the things you need it to do, right? And I know sometimes I personify it when I'm talking. It's like, I trip myself up over that in language. The AI is not a person, even if I sound like I'm talking to one. Anyway, so what is the intention of the prompts? What is it you want? What's your overall purpose, right? Are there any kind of key highlights that you want to make sure are captured? So are there any key points that you want to make sure get covered as the AI addresses and creates the thing you're asking for, right? Is there a specific reason you're asking? If you're giving it, if you're asking a prompt for like an email or an agenda or a poem, even, what is the purpose of that? So what is the purpose of this message? Is there something you want people to do? Or is there a certain outcome that you want to have from this, prompt? And make it clear, right? Make it concise. You don't need to write like a whole lot of stuff. And if you're writing something where you want it to deliver a certain kind of message, are there details such as timing or deadlines or things that you want to be sure to include? So looking at this, all right, so this is how applying this kind of impact method can change a prompt, can just improve it and tweak it up a little bit, just like you would if you were working with a new person for the first time, right? So, hey, can you write me a LinkedIn post asking for volunteer mentors for our youth mentorship program? Okay. So here's a kind of a LinkedIn post calling all mentors, why volunteer? These are generic kinds of responses because I've given it not a lot of information to go by, right? So it did kind of create, again, I said these are generative AI makes things, it's creative, right? So it did kind of who we're looking for. So we came up with that, even though I didn't really say that, and how to get involved, right? Not bad, not bad for first attempt, right? Okay, so this is applying that impact method to that same prompt where I'm much more clear about write a LinkedIn post, maximum of 200 words. So I'm saying don't go over a certain number of words, encouraging people to volunteer as mentors for our new youth mentorship program, right? The purpose is to generate excitement, emphasize the dates, right? September 10th, October 1st, mention that we're seeking both youth participants and volunteer mentors, and include last year's success stats, right? So this is much more information for the AI to use when creating this LinkedIn post. So this one is much more kind of directed and targeted, right? So if you're wanting to use this post to get people to enroll for this program and you want to have them enroll during the time period that's specified, telling them right up front, telling them why it was so successful, like why bother doing this? Well, last year, 85% of participants improved, right? So you can see that giving it more information then helps you shape it to be closer to what you want in terms of the end results. All right. And so this is the anatomy of this prompt, which I debated including this, but it was kind of, these are all these different parts and making sure I included these different sections in order to get the end result that was closer to what I want. And again, I could keep on iterating, and you'll see that when we're using AI, when we're using Copilot later, we can keep on improving. I could have kept on doing this 20 more times and it would have kept doing variations for me, right? And not all of these things might apply. So if there's no timing element, you don't have to worry about that, right? So just, it's a good set of guidelines though. So there's the ebook. I had dropped that in before. I think at this point we might saw Destiny. Oh, we can't hear you.
Yep, I realized that. So when you learn how to unmute yourself, you can talk a little bit about what if my prompt isn't giving me what I want. So I think this happens a lot too when you're switching from different AI models. So for folks who might have used ChatGPT or might have used other ones, you do familiarize yourself with writing prompts in a certain way, and not everything responds, just like people don't respond to the same question. So what do you do on the next slide if you're not getting what you want, right? So when we take a look at some of the original basics, which is, was I clear in what I was asking for? Did I give clear instruction with any of the particular nuances that I might need to give? And did I also, and this is something new, I think, for some people, is giving context to the background, the story. What is the audience that you're speaking to? Who are you in that audience? Am I a high school teacher speaking to a bilingual class? Or am I a marketing professional speaking to people learning about AI for the first time? So giving some of that context can also help generate a response in the manner in which you want to receive it. And that also speaks to the role for the AI, saying, are you a cybersecurity professional, or are you a healthcare advocate, or whatever it might be? And then also how you want it to do output. I've sometimes put things in where I meant to get an image, and I realized I didn't actually ask for it to be an image, and so I didn't get one. So you also want to be a little bit more specific to your purpose. Do I need a chart? Do I need a table? Do I need a flow chart? What it is that I need. And so when you take a look in the another way of viewing this is for examples. So on the next slide, if I am introducing a topic to someone for the first time, and let's say they have never heard of this particular thing before, am I going to get a little bit more of a response from them with no example or no context? Like if I say, hey, like picture a flying car, and the person has never seen a car and doesn't know what flying is, pretty sure that's not going to be helpful. But if you say, well, let me give you an example, a car is something you move around in, and something that flies is a bird, okay, you might get a little bit better result. But if you really kind of go into the detail and go into the explanations and try and iterate a few times, then you're probably going to come back with the results or closer to what you want, remembering all of the other context about what role do you play, does the AI play. But remember, you can iterate again and again and again, because unlike a person who is going to get tired of your examples or hearing you say the same thing in different ways multiple times, the AI is not going to get tired of it. So you can re-explain things in different ways. And you can also, on the next slide, basically experiment with it. And sometimes that means taking an entirely new approach in the way that you think of it. And I ran into this in doing some image generation, where I started out with giving a lot of detail first. and found that I wasn't getting what I wanted. And instead of giving it more and more and more detail and getting more and more kind of into the weeds with it, I was like, let me take a step back and start with the simple first and then build from it, and found that my change in thinking actually in the instance of the more realistic photo generation gave me the result that I was looking for that I could then build on. So what's interesting about this is a lot of prompt generation is trying new things, but this is, I think, where the human comes back into a lot of this as well, in thinking about not just how you think about a problem or a solution, but how you would translate that for someone else. So sometimes thinking about how you think, and in a weird way, thinking about how other people might learn from an explanation, is a good way to approach different types of prompt writing, because you can say, if I'm not getting the results I need, how can I reformulate the entire thing, take a different approach, and see if that doesn't end up getting you the result that you need. So there's a lot of experimenting that can be done. And so there's another thing that you can do when you are not entirely sure where to go, and that is a coach, right? It's always helpful to have someone say, hey, why don't you try this? And one of the things that you have in Copilot, I believe it is in the add-on version, so it's not the free with subscription, it is the paid model, is the prompt gallery. And this is where Microsoft has come up with a lot of pre-made prompt templates for not just the type of prompt, but for the product. Is it Word? Is it for, Excel? Is it something else for your particular industry, for the audience that you're speaking to? So it gives you a little bit of that already done, kind of a paint by numbers, as it were, but you can also fill in the different colors. You don't have to follow exactly what they say, but it's a place to start. So if you've never done a frog painting before, and this is your first time, you can start looking at what the prompt gallery has to find the kind of frog you want, the colors that you might want to use, and the frog that fits your particular scenario. And then once you get a little bit more familiar with it, you can start iterating on that and building it until you get more comfortable with prompt writing, but also, you can always go back to the gallery and just pick the pre-made ones instead of having to come up with something entirely original on your own. And so, in the end, on the next slide, this really comes down to, like anything else, it is a skill. So it's practice, practice, practice. Try different things out. Challenge yourself a little bit in the way that you think about these things. Utilize some of the tools that are out there. And I don't know if I'm spilling the beans, if we mention a little bit about agents here, Kim.
You might be spilling some beans, but it's okay.
Okay, so one of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit more is something called an agent. And one of the nice additional tools that you have in the more advanced license is, once you've kind of perfected something, you can build a repeatable task from it. So you don't have to write down that beautiful prompt that you finally figured out. So the next time you want to use it, you've got to figure out where you put it or write the whole thing again. You can actually use agents that you can design yourself, or agents that might have been pre-built for a certain purpose, that will essentially be that pre-packaged set of prompt instructions that you don't need to recreate. And there is an agent gallery that is in the version, but you can also create your own. And so with that, Kim, I believe I hand it back over to you for a little bit.
You do. And now I know what to get you for some holiday coming up. That's a frog paint by numbers. So anyway, let's talk about how are nonprofits using Copilot, right? And here are some use cases just to kind of get you thinking. And remember, we're going to do actual work for you here today. So, there's room to ask us for stuff. All right, so this is one that I like a lot. I am a dog and cat person, more cat than dog, but but the Humane Society, Suncoast Humane Society, kind of created these animal characters, Max and Whiskers, and this was part of a campaign to reach out to donors who were lapsed or people who had adopted from them in the past. And so they used the generative AI to generate kind of quickly and create a bunch of different kinds of emails, blog posts, social media updates for this fundraising campaign. What it allows you to do is generate lots of different things and test them out. So they ended up using generative AI for this campaign, and they ended up blowing through some of their numbers in terms of, it helped them create stories that were very compelling to their particular audience. So that's a nice story about using AI for that reason, right? A lot of people using it for grant writing, right? I got a request a couple of days ago from a client that I'm working with who's deploying Copilot. And they were asking, like, the people who want help with this, grant people, not surprisingly, right? So grants can be a little tedious to write, let's be honest here. And they were saying, like, could we give you, Destiny was talking about the giving examples of things. Can we give it, an example of a grant proposal that we feel really good about and have it emulate that style? And so that is something I'm going to be working on with them that is entirely doable in Copilot, right? But a lot of, drafting proposals, not surprising that that's a big use case. Proofreading and editing, right? So this has helped a lot of people. Like, not sometimes my grammar is terrible. And so I know I can put things through generative AI, Copilot, tell me, like, can you please correct this for me? Can you clean this up? As often how I'll ask for that one. And it gets rid of my, it's my copywriter, right? So I use it a lot less, I'll say, for formatting, but I do expect those capabilities to continue to get better. And researching, and Copilot was one of the first of these generative AI systems to give sources from the web when you asked it a question. And it can still do that, and that can be really, really helpful because you want to go to the source. You don't want to, that's how it's not making stuff up. So these are kind of some very common use cases among grant writers. Here's one that was a little bit controversial because it was early on when nonprofits first started even considering using generative AI. And some people, and this is still like a kind of a stigma, though it's going to be less so, I suspect, is it's, this idea that, oh, if I use AI, I'm cheating. It's not, and kind of like, I mean, I'm old enough, so I'll tell you, Corinne probably isn't. I'm old enough that, when people first started like going on the web, Wikipedia and stuff, isn't that cheating? Like, if you're gonna be, then it's like, well, now today, do we think of that as cheating? No, right? So it is becoming now less and less people are asking that. There's less of that stigma, but this was in the early days. The Furniture Bank did this when it was definitely like, oh, are they cheating? Are they making up pictures, right? And they used AI to generate pictures very intentionally because they were trying to do a fundraiser around, people who were living in poverty, right? And that can be a sensitive thing to go in and photograph people, like, right? It's an invasion of privacy. It's the, right? So they were able to use AI to kind of tell that story without having to involve people. Now that was a disclaimer with these about how they had made these images, but images can talk to people in ways that words, that go beyond words, especially when you're using stuff in social media and other formats like that. So they were able to create this. They were able to create it quickly, within their budget and ultimately get more furniture for people who needed furniture. Um, this is a nice story about a group of volunteers. So this is a small group of volunteers who help people who are new to this country coming to school around language, right? And they all speak different languages, and it's helping people adjust. And it also helped the volunteers get to know some things about the places where these people had come from. It helped with translation. I see it being used for translation all the time, right? I am working with someone who is like, she's not, English is not her native language. She needs to generate lots and lots of communications that will get read by the whole organization. She's not as comfortable doing this. So we create an agent for her to use to have a certain tone for her to be able to generate these emails without having to, kind of struggle with it, right? So that then she can focus on, is this getting the message that I want to get across, as opposed to her having to spend her time, which is never enough time, to wordsmith something, right? So, and in this case, this group was able to also use Copilot to get resources for things that the people were asking for in their communities. And again, harness a small team. What a small team can get more done if it has some of these tools. So, but how on earth does an organization roll out AI at their organization's destiny?
Mm. Right, exactly. Thank you. Because this is important. I think we did a poll on the session one, and I think the question still stands. How many of you think that folks in your organization are using AI? And do you have any kind of policy or guidelines surrounding it, or any kind of training that's been given to them? Because most likely everyone to some portion is or has used AI. And as I see in the chat, there's a lot of concern around the ethical use of AI and where you should or should not use it within your organization. And so if we look at the next slide, when you really look at it, a lot of organizations have started building out AI strategies, but a lot of you haven't quite yet, or there is no official policy or no real evaluation has been done in the tools that you have already in your, and what might be approved to be used and what might not be. And we hear a lot of the primary concern, of course, is around privacy for our data. And that's one of the reasons why in this particular instance, we're talking about the use of Copilot, because that is something that you already have with your Microsoft 365 subscription that is covered by the privacy of your account. So in the where can we start with being and also be able to allay some of those concerns about privacy, that's why Copilot makes sense. But there are a lot of other things that you want to take into consideration as well. And so on the next slide, if we think a little bit more about risk and benefit, right? And so this isn't necessarily just about what tools are safe to use, but it's also about where we have approved the use of the tool. We're okay with it being done for, helping streamline communication, but maybe we are not okay with it generating images for our organization to use. So there's some of the concerns that I'm seeing expressed here over, how do we make sure we're not using other people's IP? How are we making sure that we're not displaying to our patrons and other folks that we're not like using genuine human created content? Where is it okay that we use this for review? So a lot of this is what you want to consider within your policy for your organization, in conjunction with what tools are we allowing folks to use. And so when you think about what an AI policy would look like, and there is a link here for someone put it in the chat, thank you, for a little bit of a usage policy, is thinking about what the implementation of this would look like, finding out a little bit about what your staff is currently using and what they are using it for, so you can get an idea of some of the real-time, real-life use cases, and then make that determination of, is this acceptable use for our organization, or is it not, or other circumstances depending. And then that helps you guide the policy around that use, around the tools and everything else. And then, like any other policy, you want to educate your staff around why these things matter, what AI even looks like, the reasons why you may or may not want to use it. And do that in conjunction with a little bit of training. So this is all what it would look like to try and implement this within an organization. But it starts out, I think, first with the understanding of where you are and where you want to get to, and then creating the guidelines, the policy, and the education around that. And so on the 365 side, we've talked about the different subscription models where if you have the Microsoft 365 subscription, the basic one, or anything that offers you the Microsoft general tooling, it can be the business premium or basic, you're going to get the privacy protected Copilot with that. If you want to go more into it, if you want it to be able to look at what's in SharePoint, integrate with Microsoft Office, use some of the agents and other things, then that is that add-on subscription piece. But as I mentioned, the reason why we're focusing on Copilot today is because all of the organizations who are in 365, this is a safe place to kick off as long as you are using your organizational account. But you still want to make sure when you look at the model that you're using, the subscription that you're using on the next slide, that you are taking into account data governance. And what I mean by that is if you are using the basic model, it will just have access to the internet and to things that you give it, files that you upload to it specifically. But when you're using the add-on subscription, it will have access to organizational data like SharePoint and OneDrive, Teams, and things like that. So if you don't have your house in order by knowing where your sensitive information is, and there's a risk that this is going to find something because you have your PII or your HR data stored in places that it maybe shouldn't be, you do have the potential for it being found. So you do want to always think about the data governance side of things when you are utilizing tools that have access to your data. So this isn't necessarily about Microsoft having access to things and it not being protected, because that is protected because you're already putting that information into your SharePoint sites or your OneDrive. It's more about what might be disclosed to folks who shouldn't have access to that information because somebody's filed it in the wrong place. So you kind of want to think about this as the holistic piece of your data in general. Is, do we know where our important information is? And now that we are considering putting in a tool that might access it because we didn't control the folks who have access to the data, something to think through a little bit too in that protective state. Okay, and so I think we are going into show it to us live.
The
Yes.
fun part. The
The fun part. So
Do my
this is
homework
where-
for me.
yes, this is
Yay!
where
Okay.
we've done some work for people. So I'm going to stop sharing.
I'm
And
gonna
then, oh wait,
I think
I have to
yeah,
share.
there's
Wait, I have
one,
one more share. Up. Where is it? There
the
it is.
context
Sorry.
slide.
Yes. Sorry. Apologies. And there you are. All right. So, and I'm seeing comments about like AI, will cause us to get lazy and stuff like that. Well, hopefully we won't let ourselves get lazy. And I
Right.
use it as a first draft. I don't know about anyone else here, but I struggle with blank screen. But I end up spending more time than thinking about what it is I'm really trying to say. And it gives me that ability, right? Because unfortunately, there are never enough hours in a day. So that's kind of one of the ways of thinking about it. And it is a trade-off, right? You want to think about how you're using it, and it's a choice. It's a choice not just for us as individuals, but also for organizations to make these decisions. So the comments that were really good in there about how organizations should then the policy template should be a starting point for the discussion in your organization about how do we want to roll this out and use it, right? This is not, you just take it rote. Like that's, you kind of work through these questions. Yeah, so 3 modes of Copilot. We're going to show you all 3. All right, so as we were saying in that slide very, very early on, right? There's the free, no account acquired, nothing. No commitment, no credit card, no nothing, but no protection over your data either. Because that's part of, you don't have an account, you're not logging in. So there's, right? But again, what are you going to put in there if you ask for a recipe, or what was the thing we were asking for last week, Destiny? Should there be eggs and potato salad? Right? That I'm okay with that data going back in. I don't know, Corin, you can think about that question. There were 2 different schools of thought here. Okay, so Copilot with the account. All right, so I believe Destiny, that's the one you have, right?
I have
You
the
have
super fancy
you
one.
have the super fancy one? Okay, we both have super fancy, which lets us use the apps. That's, I guess, we're special. But most of what we are going to show you, like 90% of it, is actually stuff that you don't need the paid subscription one. It's just the one that is free with the Microsoft 365 subscription that you have, so long as you go in logged in. Anything else I should say to set the stage here?
Nope, we're just going to show you the 3 different flavors of Copilot.
Okay.
Starting with vanilla. And I saw in the chat also, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. That people were talking about how do you verify your sources, or where Copilot might give you sources. So I wouldn't write something directly from Copilot or AI, because that's definitely cheating and you should use your brain. I always say that AI is a tool, not a replacement for creativity or critical thinking. So I agree with you guys on that. But let's say you ask just for like a rough draft, because a blank page is tough sometimes and you do need a starting point. They can give you citations. I would literally go to these and read and do my own research, do further research, get ideas, use this as a starting point, not an ending. That's the biggest thing. I said, write an educational blog about frogs for a high school biology class. I just wanted to throw that in there. But
that was frog dissection, Corinne.
Right.
what?
But I think that's also important. I mean, I know that question came up about, can it cite resources? Yes, it absolutely can. And then you can go and click and validate those. And you can even be more specific, saying cite only university studies or cite medical journals. So
Exactly.
you can tell it the type of sources that you want to cite.
Yeah. And then you need to read, do your own research, and decide, okay, do I want to use this in X, Y, and Z, or do I think this information might not be credible? Okay, moving on from our prompts. I just had to throw that in there. But so we got quite a few prompts, and I have a process when I'm coming up with my own prompts, because I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I know what I want, but it's tough to know how to ask for it in life, with AI, with anything. And so oftentimes I'll ask AI, hey, here's a rough prompt. And my specific words for the most part will be, well, I don't know if they'll be my specific ones, but I want more details about X, Y, and Z. Can you fill in the blanks, because I don't know what else to write? Like, really, I start that simple, especially with the free version, because you're not getting the bells and whistles. You have your prompts, and I'll show you a few other things. But when it comes to this version, it's really just to test out. It's vanilla. It's to see how can I use AI in a simple sense, and what tools would I use AI for? So the prompt originally was a little bit generic. So I asked for more details, and Copilot came up with, how do we begin initially integrating the community-centric fundraising principles into our fundraising emails, donation pages. I added marketing materials and sponsorship documents to ensure they reflect our values of equity, community well-being, and collective action. And they include a reference. So let's see. So it gives you some prompts. It gives you an outline. I like that it breaks everything down for you. And it also gives you further prompts as well that you don't have to generate yourself. Because sometimes it's like, okay, so now what am I doing with this information? So let's see. How can we engage the community in our fundraising efforts? Let's see. I'm going to steal this. So from that, it'll give you more ideas, and you can click these and you can see more resources. Like I said, AI should be a tool, not a replacement. I'm a creative myself, and I don't want it to be something that we're using it to replace us. We're just using it to cut some of the time and also give us ideas. I mean, that's what I'm using it for. So once I did that, I also can ask it, okay, now that you gave me some ideas, can you give examples? Because I'm not quite connecting. So they can give you some examples of other foundations that have done things and what's worked for them. At this point, it becomes market research. So using it to see, okay, I liked how their campaign was. What could I model mine after but not copy? So that's the thing. I wouldn't type it in directly like, oh, model it after this, but you can kind of get an idea of what their ideas were. Okay, for this next one, I'm going to be completely honest. When I read it, and I'm sorry if this was your prompt, I was like, what am I doing here? What am I supposed to be doing with prompt? I literally typed out, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you? And I erased it. I was like, you know what? Copilot got it. They'll get it for me. But oftentimes, I feel like we all have, like my boss will be like, hey, can you do X, Y, and Z for me? And I'm like, I don't know what he's asking. So I will literally go and ask Copilot, hey, my boss said this. Can you dissect what this means and what are the steps to getting to this point? Or how does this translate to marketing? So for this one, I did type in originally. I don't know what this wants exactly, but we're going to go with it. So this is the prompt. It says tax receipt for cash and in-kind donation letter to donor based on our mission and includes gratitude. Please include donations for auction items that have an estimated value. Include logo and contact information, and then their information. Now, if I had a different version of Copilot, I could do the formatting and have the logo and have a whole template for the company. So everybody in the company could place in their own information depending on who they were sending it out to, which is nice and saves a lot of time. But because I have the free version, it'll just give me an outline, and I would have to copy and paste this in Word to then edit it or share it with people. But so it gives you a nice baseline, kind of a format of what it could look like, and a voice, and even donor information. Now, the first time I plugged this in, it didn't look like this. So it could look, let's see if I'm going to plug it in again and say what I said originally. Actually, I have it all typed out. I don't want you guys to watch me spelling, but wait, I don't know exactly.
And I think this is a good example. You know, there's a lot of conversation in the chat about where people, if they took a second, might be able to think of these things on their own. But there's a lot of areas where you don't have the necessary expertise. And it's not like a research project where the results of it are something that have to be peer reviewed, where you're putting out factual or scientific statements. When it comes to something that's more of a creative, like what's a good letter? I've never written a thank you letter before that might be accessible or enjoyable by all with this kind of context. I think that's a good example of a use case where someone doesn't have that expertise and there isn't fact checking that is necessary. Of course, you want to re-review it, make sure the tone is right for your organization. But that's where this can also be helpful, is that, I think particularly in organizations where you don't have people who have expertise in everything, if it's not something that is definitive like scientific review or citing sources, but more in the help me think through how I do this thing, I've never done it before, it can get you through a bit of the first timer syndrome too.
Yeah. And look, when I said, I don't know what I'm asking for, but can you help me out? It gave me a totally different format. So sometimes you can be honest. Copilot will not judge you. AI will not judge you. So ask away. And now we'll move on to the next tier.
Yeah.
I believe it's
Destiny.
Yeah, so I think one of the requests I got was about And they gave me anonymized data. So I want to be clear that this is not someone's real addresses or anything like that. So they gave me an example. Let me share my screen because that would probably make this a lot more interesting. Give me one
Yeah,
sec.
so some of the things that we're doing, someone had asked about our choice of certain process, certain approaches. These had come from the requests from people. So
Yeah. So people specifically asked to, how would you do this thing? And so this one I think is interesting. And this is a good example of do I necessarily need AI for this? Or would there have been another way? But I am not good at Excel. I rarely use it. And so while I know there's probably formulas that if I was a really awesome Excel expert would have done this without AI, I have no idea what those formulas are, how to write them, how to even look them up. So in this scenario, they had two address fields. One was the address that include apartment information, and then the other field was the address with no apartments, but had the the zip code +4 format. And so they wanted the result that merged the two of those together. And while it turns out this was simply an Excel formula of text before formula, there was no way I would have been able to figure that out because I am not an Excel person. So I asked it, I said, hey, can you update column A with the zip +4 format and the data from column B and merge it into column C? And that's exactly what it did. But then I saw, well, wait a minute, there was errors in a couple of these. And so I was like, I don't know or understand the formula well enough to understand why there's an error. And so I was able to ask it, hey, can you double check that for me? Because there's a problem on one of these. And it was like, oh yeah, the problem is because the formula was referencing the wrong state, and this is what you could do. I'm like, okay, great, fix it for me. But the nice thing, well, gee, do you want me to check for other errors for you? And I could say, well, yes, please go ahead and do that. So this is a perfect example of where AI was helpful to someone who doesn't know anything about Excel. It wasn't cheating in my eyes because I could have, yes, gone to Google and Googled what I was supposed to do here, but I would have had to have figured that out before I was able to even know what to Google. And so just simply asking Copilot, what is it I can do on this Excel file, basically kind of, did it for me. And then when it found errors, it also allows me to do the error correction. And once it explained to me as well why that gave the particular error, rather, I was able to understand and say, oh, okay, well, this is because it's Georgia. And I'm looking at the formula and, oh, that's why. And if I just then manually change it, so here's a little bit of that human review that comes into it. And now, voila, I now understand the formula a little bit better. I've learned something, and I also know how to correct it if necessary. So this is a way that you can use AI that you didn't have to necessarily, but the amount of steps it probably would have taken me to Google and figure out what this formula would look like when I don't know Excel probably would have taken a considerable more amount of time than asking Copilot to do it for me. And I learned something in the process. So that was one of the requests.
Wow.
And another, right? I mean, go Excel, right? Because I'm terrible. Like, you now asked me about a pivot table.
No, but who
never
knows that thing? Like,
right? I mean, exactly. I'm sure there's someone out there like Excel expert who's like, I knew this, but that person was not me. One of the other things, and I think I hit on this a little bit before, is someone asked me to make an image. And this is a really interesting thing about images. And I will say another helpful thing about learning for Copilot is Copilot has a huge amount of tutorials that it provides for you. So for folks who are interested in the ongoing learning, or where could we have our staff go to just learn more about the tool, they have a whole bunch of video tutorials on what you can do, what makes a good prompt, better prompt writing, how to use it for starting a presentation, and a whole bunch of other things. And going through this, what I also found was a very useful guide on how to do images. Because this is, I think, where a lot of people get tripped up, particularly when you want something that's a little bit more realistic. And this is where I found putting in a whole bunch of detail initially didn't get me the realistic results. Starting very simple with what I was asking for, I think got me the most realistic results. So someone said they wanted an image of an accountant pulling their hair out. That was it. An accountant pulling his hair as he looks troubled, right? So I put that in with absolutely no real context. And I think in some cases, you know, the images that I got were pretty, I'm trying to blow it up, pretty decent. The hands don't look terribly abnormal or anything anymore. But what I noticed is that the more I started iterating on it by adding additional things, that's actually where it got a little quirky. When I said, oh, show me an Excel spreadsheet on a laptop, unfortunately, because it reads it literally if showing is putting it on the back of the laptop. And then I said, oh, make it more chaotic, more whatever. And then it just got out of control with like 25 million calculators and things like that. So what's interesting is while we did spend a lot of time in the talking about prompt engineering, and sometimes in certain cases, give it the story, give it the background, tell it the voice you want things in, where you might want to reverse that thinking is in image creation. If you're trying to do something more realistic, if you're trying to go, you know, just super froggy, I'm trying to find my frogs. So if you just really wanted to, you know, get nuts on the frog side of things, then you can, you know, get more in detail of, you know, give me the frog. And then you can get more creative with the type of frog and wanted specifically a poison dart frog. But you'll notice I just kept it simple. And so with image generation, if you're trying to be realistic, I found simple is better. If you're trying to make something more full, something more creative, something more artsy, then you can do the larger iterations of things. And so one of the other things, you know, when I talked a little bit about the prompt galleries. So when you are in this version, you also have the prompt gallery. And I mentioned that this is where you can choose the specific application you want it for, be it Word or PowerPoint or what have you, and what you're looking to do. And I think we tend to get hung up a lot on AI doing research and only research for us. And that's why the facts and the citations become, you know, a real sticking point. And I saw in the chat a lot of folks were like, oh, it's easy to say you need human review, but what does human review look like? And I think in instances where you're doing things that are not focusing on that particular type of use of AI, but when you're doing a thought or an image or write me a letter or feeding it a specific file, like a bunch of addresses, or perhaps it's a very long PDF where you just need a summary, it works differently in those cases because it's going off of a data source with a very specific set of instructions. And I think some of the confabulations and hallucinations are different in that case. And so when it comes to the human review on that type of work, it's not necessarily the, am I looking at legitimate cited resources, because that's not what you're coming from. That's I'm helping you think of an idea. You're helping me write a letter. Yeah, I'm going to reread the letter and make sure that it makes sense. But that's the extent of human review that might be needed there. So the use case, I think the amount of human review also can very much depend on the use case. But going back to the prompts, you know, you have the task, but we also have roles. So, you know, let's say I am in nonprofits. And so some of these prompts for you to try is planning a fundraising event, looking at donor recognition, fine tuning a message, things like that, things where it's just an assistant. You know, maybe you have someone in your organization who is a good writer. And would you go to them and all the time and say, hey, can you review this for me and tell me if it makes sense? Is it, you know, is the grammar correct? there are tools that can do that. I don't think it's necessarily being disingenuous, particularly if you're taking your original content and saying, fix this up for me, rephrase a few things, find a better word. You would use Grammarly, or you might use a thesaurus. It's kind of the same thing to a certain extent. Creating something totally by AI and then passing it off is 100% original, that's a different story. And with that, Kim, I think I'm handing it over to you for some of the stuff that you did.
Okie doke. That was an amazing Excel formula. Holy cow.
I never would have, I mean, honestly.
And I use Excel and I was like, what? All right. I'm just going to share this whole thing here. Where's my share? Here it is. Window, and where are you? Blue thing. Okay. All right. So someone had asked in the beginning in the discussion about when I was talking about the impact method of writing a prompt, and someone had said, well, can't you just, is there a way to do that within Copilot? And yes, in fact, there is. Copilot, so I'm in Copilot now, so we can go to a kind of a, okay, so this is just kind of Copilot. Oop, nothing. I'm going to go to work and then web. And so we have the fancy one. But see, this is the Copilot coach. So it's what's known as an agent. So think of it as a pre-packaged kind of complex prompt. So inside of this is a prompt that then helps me to write prompts more effectively for Copilot. So it's right in there. You can also make your own, okay? And if we have a moment toward the end, I will show you an example of the types of things it can do that are pretty amazing. So in this example, where are we? Okay, so I got a request, and will say it took me a little while to parse this one through, but they wanted to create different kinds of materials, an outline, agenda, and slides, okay, for a workshop on SELECT, which is the statewide Early Literacy Education Collaborative Tennessee. Okay, so so I pretty much took what I had been asked for verbatim. So you can see there's kind of a lot of information here. So I said, please read this request and use it to create a prompt that I can then use to create different materials. Okay. And I kind of gave, so this was all this different information that I got from the participant, right? So this is a lot of stuff here. When I looked at it first, I was like, oh, wow, I don't know if I can like sort my way through this one. But then prompt coach, sure, I can help you generate a prompt for that. So it went ahead and generated this prompt, right? The goal, it provides context. And that can be a very helpful thing for these systems to understand, like, what's the context that I'm asking for this in, right? And it pulled this information out of those kind of long paragraphs of stuff. And then I told it also that it could find further information on SELECT because I personally didn't actually know much about anything about it. And now this was granted, this is older, but it's basically literacy principles. So I thought I'd get a pass here, but for the ideally I would get a 2025 one, but whatever. So this is what I was able to find. And I wasn't sure what the person wanted, but I said 3-hour workshop. Okay. So, and which includes breakout sessions, audience and presentations, we got to keep them going on this, blah, blah, blah. So I gave it this report. It was a PDF report, and Copilot does a really nice job of kind of ingesting this type of information, synthesizing it, and then incorporating it into the prompt. And so there it just generated more, made it more kind of, I'll say, rich as a prompt. Okay. And then it started generating the information. So here's a preliminary outline. Boop, 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 boop. Right. And then this looks good. Okay, so this is now I want a prompt for different materials. So it gave me this as an example. That's like, yeah, that was okay. But I want to actually want to be able to make, so I can make different types of things like slides and an outline and workshop topics and discussion questions, all that kind of stuff. So then it reshaped it into this prompt. And then again, gave me a workshop. Okay. So then, right. So then I asked it to create an expanded version of that outline, which it then did. Right. So it's building upon that kind of skin and bones outline that it had created before to give me more information about things. And I noticed that in here, there were a couple of presentations, right? The importance of early literacy, the Bookum, which is the nonprofit that was asking for this, etc. So then it asked me, would you like me to make a any of these things? And I said, sure, make me a facilitator's guide. Okay. All right, why not? Is this going to be verbatim what we're going to use? No, but it's a great start to then get a discussion going with my team, right? And then it gave guides for the different sections, right? Not bad. Unfortunately, I don't know much about early childhood literacy, but I'm trying my best here. So then it gave me I wanted editable templates for the worksheets. And I don't know if these are going to go. But anyway, downloaded templates that I could use for worksheets that I give out. Right. And so this was not bad. So then I wanted to make slides. Okay. And I always think like, this is the miracle AI. This is the killer app in AI, the killer application of AI that I want. Because I make a ton of slides. I want something that can make slides for me that are like, okay looking. Right. So I was really impressed because this was the first time this happened. So please create a detailed slide outline, blah, blah, blah. And I dropped in, the outline. It created this outline for me. So in the past, I would have pasted this into PowerPoint, but then at the end of however many slides, it said, would you like me to generate the PowerPoint file? Okay, so here's a thing to note. These systems are constantly being improved upon. So it didn't used to do this like when I first started teaching this class, right? I could paste all this stuff in, but now it's doing that. So then I downloaded the presentation automatically, and then the importance. So I'll spare you. But then what it did was give me this very skin and kind of like very just very plain text. But another thing I've noticed with Copilot, and my design choices might leave something to be desired. Corinne, be kind. Oops. But what happened to the designer tool? Kevin. Okay, there you are. All right. So what it did was very easily, I was able to go through each slide and kind of pick a format, right? And this again is Copilot helping make so that I can then focus on the presentation itself instead of, hammering out these slides. Does this mean I'm going to just start to talk about early childhood literacy tomorrow? I hope not, right? But it's a good start if I wanted to get the ball rolling, right? It's blank screen syndrome. So not bad. I don't know. I'd have to ask the person who asked for this if they're here. Melissa. I don't know. This could be gibberish. Again, verify everything. One of my golden rules for using generative AI, don't ask for it if you can't verify it, right? You can also translate very nicely. Again, you translate, but then you would want to show it to a native speaker of that language. Did this come out right? It certainly helps you get the job started in a nice way, right? So this is one example. Another example I wanted to share is someone had asked, here's an example from a previous class where it gave me different versions in Spanish of various presentations and stuff. All right, so someone had asked about, okay. Now, and this is a Kevin question, right? Whenever they ask something technical here, I hurl it on to Kevin, but then I thought, let me see what happens. So the question I got from Marilu was how to integrate Copilot into Outlook to create team lists, planners from emails. So I was like, whoa, I do not know that. So I asked Copilot, and kind of just like Destiny asked Copilot to help her with that Excel, here's like how you would do this. Now, I didn't go ahead and do this because I actually don't have any administrative controls over this instance of Microsoft, but here are instructions for doing this. So it is great as a reference for getting how-tos. All right. So, I asked for a Power Automate flow. Okay. Right. This is how, the triggers, blah, blah, blah. So it showed me how I would create this type of thing. There's one other thing I wanted to show while we still have a couple minutes of this. And that is, where are you? Nope. Home. Here it is. Okay. So this is fake data, but this is something that I think is also kind of cool in Excel that you can do. So this is fake HR data. And if this were data that was okay to use, right, didn't have like super sensitive information in it, and I was in my work Copilot, like logged in at work, which I actually happen to be here, I could, conceivably do this and it would be okay. It's not feeding out into the world, right? So, I want what's in this data set? This is a lot of stuff about employee attrition. Like, how am I supposed to understand any of this stuff, right? So let's do some deeper analysis. So what these tools do for data analysis is they use Python, right? And they generate Python code. They're very good at that for doing kind of data analysis, data summaries, data visualizations. Okay, they do that mostly with Python code. So it's okay, start. All right. So it's doing some analysis. It's loading the data. It's working. It's looking at age, attrition. All right. So this is, again, exploratory data analysis. Like, I don't really know here. So it's been loaded. So let's say I'd like to visualize the distribution of employee age and income. All right. Sometimes these blow up, by the way, while you're doing a demo, which, because I'm doing a demo, probably will happen. Just forewarning. It's it's generating new code. Let's see if it corrects its own mistake. I should have asked it for that other thing. Whoops. Okay. Not bad, right? Because I'm just doing kind of exploratory analysis of this huge data set. Explore the impact of age on attrition rates. Again, so these are the types of things you can do with these tools, and they do get better and better all the time.
Yeah, what was that quote? The AI you use today is the worst version of AI you'll ever use.
Yeah, so it continues to improve, right? That thing. So this isn't bad considering if someone gave me this data set and said, what does this tell us about, things we need to think about in holding on to our employees? Is this a helpful way to start looking at the data? Is it definitive? Would I turn this into my chief human resources without reviewing it? No, but it's a good starting point for looking at this information. So I think we're at almost, we have a few more slides as we close this out. Actually, and I realized people were free to ask questions during this. Though I don't know if there are questions we have, that much time. We have a few minutes though.
I did see one question about accessibility, and I did put some information in there that Copilot is accessible with screen readers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, closing thoughts. Just kind of meditative and serene. All right, so the thing is just practice. play with it if you're interested in it. If it concerns you, don't use it, or bring back that policy template to your organization. Think, how are we going to deal with this? Because you know what? There are probably people in your organization using it. Test things out. So this is Ethan Mollick is one of the best kind of writers on AI, and he's been talking about it. He's from the University of Pennsylvania, and he's been he's been in there since the very beginning, in early days of generative AI, and he writes about it very clearly. And actually, he and someone else who's in this webinar, Deb Stullegros, would you put your link to your newsletter in here? I know you're in here, because there are not a lot of people write about it in very accessible ways. Ethan Mollick and Deb are people who do that. So the easiest way is just to use it for tasks you try out every day. Some of it will work, some of it will not. Some of it will be like, ugh, don't ask AI for that, right? After about 10 or so hours, you start to develop a way of made up word here, but dialoguing with it, right? And that is really the best way to learn, is really teaching yourself, right? So why spend time learning about it? So this is our famous kind of, we've been teaching technology to nonprofits since for a very long time, let's put it that way. So often when I come in with new technologies, and this included way back in the day, like access databases and stuff like that, people are like, no, I'm too busy, right? I got too much work to do. But I'd say, oh, but you got these like wheels that are square, and it's hard to do things. And why? And then eventually people try it, and it's like, oh, wow, that really saved me time. Like, I will never try to figure out an Excel formula again. It's just like I will never, here's a true confession for this audience. I will never turn a paragraph into bullets by hand. Done. Right? It's a better starting point for me. Am I lazy? Maybe, but my time's better spent kind of cleaning it up and making sure it's saying the right thing. All right. What we're finding with AI is often, it's the same, like, we're too busy, I don't want to learn about this new stuff. But we're also hearing from people, hey, this is going to take our jobs, right? And you see this, and actually you see things that something blew up at Duolingo, I think, where they tried like, oh, we're going to get rid of a bunch of jobs. And then like they ended up eating crow. Okay. So not good. Right. But what ideally, especially for nonprofits that are resource constrained and where there's not enough hours in a day to begin with, right, you can then have it again, instead of doing the word smithing, let me do the kind of idea creation, thinking, and that part of the writing, right? And so it gives you time to do more of the quality, the human work that's so important. And they do have the potential to transform how we work. Remember, they're assistants. You always keep a human in the loop and always verify what it says. Alrighty, I think that's it. Is this where we go back to Arika?
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I just put a survey link in the chat. I'll put it again. We would love to hear your comments on what you thought about the webinar. Thank you, Kim, Destiny, Corinne, Kevin in the background. Kevin's going to put his email in the chat and sure be following up with you with some questions you may have for TechSoup. And we'll see you guys on the next webinar. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.